Never say I can't. My dad always used to tell me this when I was younger. He still says it to this day, but he said it a lot in my childhood. The purpose of this speech is to congratulate my dad on all of the things he has done to set good examples for me and my sister. My dad has been a big influence in my life, and he recently just fought through COVID. I will be explaining how my dad has been the most inspirational person ever since my childhood, how he took his dad's passing very well, and how he fought his way through COVID. When I was younger and I would strike out or miss a tackle, I would get really down on myself, and my dad would come over and talk to me and help me get over it and forget about it. I would always talk back and say, I can't do it, but my dad would respond and say, never say you can't do it. It would always motivate me to try even harder, and it usually resulted in me getting a big hit on the baseball field or a good play on the football field. My dad is probably one of the most significant people in my life because he's always believed in me. As I said, my dad lost his dad, my grandpa, but that didn't bring him down. When I was in 6th grade, he lost his dad, Mike, to Alzheimer's. This was probably the saddest I ever saw my dad, and when we got home from the hospital after we found out Mike had passed, he taped a picture of Mike onto a balloon and let it float away into the sky. My whole family was crying, and we gave him a huge hug, and he said, that's just the way life goes. At least I'm pretty sure that was what he said, but it was kind of hard to understand him because our whole family was sobbing. It took about a week for my family to get back to normal, but for my dad, it was around 2 weeks. Ever since Mike passed, my dad checks up on his mom, my grandma Sandy, almost every day. Since she's getting old, has diabetes, and is living by herself, my dad is always bringing her healthy food or doing her yard work for her. He always makes sure to put everyone else before himself. When he fought his way through COVID, he set good examples for people going through the same thing. The past month has been a roller coaster for our whole family, but especially my dad. Towards the beginning of November, my dad started having COVID symptoms. We were hoping it was just a little cold or maybe the flu, but his symptoms started getting really bad to the point where he couldn't get out of bed. My mom started realizing he was breathing abnormally fast when he was sleeping, so she took him to the ER right away. My dad was so delirious when he was getting into the car that he even forgot to shut the passenger door. He ended up testing positive with COVID and also pneumonia. His oxygen levels were severely low, and if my mom didn't take him in at that point, a lot could have gone wrong. While my dad was in the hospital, we would always FaceTime him to make sure he was doing okay. After about 3 weeks passed, he finally came back home the day before Thanksgiving. We all gave him a huge hug, and he said that was the hardest time of his life. He also said he said it felt like the same continuous day and not 3 weeks, since it was the same thing over and over. But he pushed himself to get out every day and walk the halls just so he wouldn't stay weak. He said there were a lot of patients who weren't getting out of bed, and the nurses were using my dad as an example so people would follow him. I thought this was kind of cool, how my dad was setting a good example even when he was going through rough times. This shows how he never gives up and he keeps pushing himself to the end. To end it off, I'd like to thank my dad and also congratulate him for all he has done. He has been the most inspirational person ever since my childhood. He took his dad's passing very well, and he's fought his way through COVID. I'd also like to remind everyone that there are a lot more good people than there are bad people. You just have to recognize the little things that people do for each other. Thank you for listening.